Welcome to Senior Secondary Biology. In this video, we're going to discuss genetics. So genetics is an interesting topic because it is concerned with how we inherit certain characteristics from our parents. So the way this topic is going to be dealt with, we're going to start with the introduction to genetics so that we know what genetics is all about. Then we'll move on to variation. We are going to study how we look different from how we all look different despite claims that we come from the same parents. We all come from Adam and Eve, but why is it that we look so different? Then from there we're going to study cell division, how cells divide themselves to bring to life new cells. Then also we're going to study monohybrid crosses. Well, we're going to study how characteristics are inherited. Then from there we're going to study blood groups and also something called sex linkage. Then we'll finish up with mutation, which is going to be abnormalities in inheritance or actually in cells, in genes, in chromosomes, the ways that for now you might not understand, but with time you are going to understand as we continue with our discussion. So what is genetics anyway? So genetics is the study of the mechanism involved in the control, transmission, and expression of inherited characteristics. In another simple way, you can say genetics is just the study of inheritance. So about inheritance, I'm not talking about you hoping to inherit that watch from your uncle when he dies, or that shoe from your auntie when she dies. I'm talking about how you look like your father or your daddy or your grandpa or your grandma. So that's the kind of inheritance we're going to study. That's the kind of inheritance that genetics addresses. So we're going to start with variation. We all come from the same parents, but why is it that we are all different? So this part is not going to go deep into details on why we're different, but it's going to start the types of differences. So we're going to base the entire study or genetics on what are called characteristics. So the other way that I'm going to be using for characteristics is trait. T-R-A-I-T, trait. So a trait and characteristics means the same thing. So when we talk about, for example, height, how is it that people have different heights? Okay, so variation is going to study the types of differences that traits have. Okay, so variation in short is just the difference in characteristics among organisms of the same species. I'm going to be using humans for a lot of examples because it's easy to relate to examples that involve humans because they are part of our daily lives. I can't talk about polar bears when maybe we have never seen a polar bear in real life. So I'm going to be using humans as a species to study. So there are two types of variation. There's what is called continuous variation and discontinuous variation. So when you get a trait, for example, skin color, it's a characteristic. You get the characteristic skin color. You want to see how skin color varies in a population, or how skin color is different in a population. For example, in Zambia. So when you do that study, depending on the trait you're concerned with, whether skin color or something else, you're going to get two types of variations, or the type of change are only two in type. The first is continuous, the other one is discontinuous. So what is continuous variation? So continuous variation is a type of variation where a characteristic has many intermediate forms between two extremes. So the keywords that I want you to pay attention to are many intermediate forms. Intermediate means in between. So you can have one extreme is like one far end and the other far end. For example, if we're talking about skin color, we can say black is one end and white is the other end. Or if we're talking about height, we can say shortness is one end and tallness is the other end. So continuous variation is that type of variation where we have the in-betweens. So we don't have short people and tall people only, but we have people with heights that are between the short ones and the tall ones, the average ones. So when we have lots of in-betweens, many of intermediate forms, then we're talking about continuous variation. So examples of characteristics that show continuous variation in humans are height, complexion, and body mass or weight. So what causes continuous variation? So there are two causes of continuous variation. One is sorry for using this word, but it's a word that you're going to get acquainted with soon. So the first is controlled by many genes. The word is genes. What is a gene? So a gene is for now I will use a definition that is going to be simple but useful for understanding. So a gene is like the unit of inheritance. In short, it's the one that determines a certain characteristic. For example, tallness, a gene is the one that determines if you're going to be tall, if you're going to be short, or if you're going to be someone in between. So if a certain characteristic is being controlled by many genes, it means it's possible to find people who are tall, for example, who are short, and who are in between because they are different genes. So if there's control by many genes, then of course you can have continuous variation. The second is influenced by environmental factors such as diet or climate. So let's say we have this population that has two types of genes, that has a certain trait, let's say height, being controlled by two types of genes. So one gene is for tallness, the other gene is for shortness. So in short, in this population, we have tall people, extremely tall people, and extremely short people. Okay, so let's say a situation has happened such that there's new type of diet that has been introduced in that population, a diet that makes people have a loss of protein such that they start getting taller. So it's possible that even those short people can grow taller than they were before. So in that population, there's a chance of finding the tall people, the extremely tall people, the extremely short people, and those in between. Okay, so that's another factor that contributes to variation, influenced by environmental factors. So the best way we can tell if you have continuous variation of a certain trait in a population is you do a survey. You have to, for example, if it's height, you collect the heights of all the people in Zambia, for example, as a population you are studying. So when you get that height, you plot the number of people against height, so that you see how many people have this height. What you are going to get is a curve like this. So this bell-shaped curve is also called the normal distribution curve. So always when you plot the values, you get this kind of a curve, then you have continuous variation. Next, we look at discontinuous variation. So discontinuous variation is opposite of continuous variation and is defined as a type of variation where a characteristic has clear-cut different groups or distinct groups with no intermediate forms. So in this kind of variation, if we take height as an example, we have tall people and short people only. We don't have the in-betweens. With that being said, examples are 1, 6. So we have males, we have females, we have boys, we have girls. We don't have in-betweens. Of course, in reality, they are there in-betweens, and with, of course, different causes and the likes, but even the in-betweens, you can see it's a combination of both male and female. So we only have two groups, male and female. So that's an example of discontinuous variation. We don't have in-betweens. Two, blood groups. So we have four types of blood groups: blood group A, blood group B, blood group AB, blood group O. We don't have in-betweens. We only have four types of groups. You can't find any blood group that is not these four. Okay, so this is an example of discontinuous variation. The third is color of eyes. So the specific color of eyes that are there, there are no in-betweens. We have black, we have coffee, we have we have black, we have brown, we have blue eyes, there is also green, but we don't find combinations of black and green and the likes. Okay, there are also certain types which are not there, like red eyes, of course. uh, yeah, there are some people who can have eyes that are reddish but not eye color which is red. So with that being said, these are examples. But what causes discontinuous variation? The first is of course controlled by one of your genes. For example, sex. It is controlled by a gene that determines if someone is male, and the other that determines if someone is female. So there are just two genes that determine sex. So that's why we can't have in-betweens. The second is of course lack of environmental influence. So if there is no influence from the environment, like diet, any kind of maybe temperature from the environment, then of course we can't have discontinuous. That's the reason why we have discontinuous variation. So this is everything about variation, but actually before we can even say we're done with variation, maybe we take a look at an example of a graph that looks like the graph you should expect when you're trying to plot a discontinuous variation curve. So usually we use this kind of graphing. So in this kind of graphing, you can see that we have distinct groups. Here I've used blood group as an example. We have number of people and different blood groups that are there. So there are people with blood group O, blood group AB, BA. We don't have in between, like between O and AB, or AB and B, or B and A. No, these are the types of blood groups we have, and they are very distinct groups. So this is how a graph of discontinuous variation should look like. So to end this part, we're going to look at chromosomes and genes. The main interest is chromosomes. What is a chromosome? So I'll give a complex definition, but I'll try to simplify it. So a chromosome, chromosomes are DNA threads found in a nucleus and responsible for storage of inherited information in the form of genes. This is quite complex. It's not as simple as it looks. So chromosomes are DNA threads. Threads, like, a thread, something you used to tie something is a thread. In Nyanja it's called kantambo and the likes. So chromosomes are DNA threads. What's DNA? So DNA is somewhere where information about inheritance is stored. So everything that makes up you, the information is stored in DNA. So chromosomes are just threads that have lots of DNAs. The DNAs are grouped in form of genes. Okay, so what I want you to take from here is chromosomes are where genes are, and genes are where DNA is. DNA has information, so genes are lots of DNA that of course determine a certain characteristic. Then on the chromosomes, that's where those genes are laying. So we're going to normally when inheritance is happening, when a certain characteristic about an offspring or a child is about to be determined, so chromosomes are the ones which actually participate in the determination. Of course, the two chromosomes from two parents are going to share their genes, meaning that their DNAs have been shared. Okay, so you can view a chromosome like it's a bus, then the genes are people, then the DNAs are what makes up people. So this is how a chromosome looks like. So it has got 2 legs here and 2 legs here. So each of the leg is called the chromatid, and the center is called the centromere. So if you look at the chromatids, the genes are just we can have a gene here, we can have another gene here, another gene here. Then on this group of genes, on this gene, there are lots of DNA that determine a certain characteristic. That's how to view it. So chromatids found on the same chromosomes are called sister chromatids. So these are sister chromatids. This is just a word we use to define chromatids found on the same chromosome. So now we're going to look at what are called chromosome numbers. This is an interesting part. So each organism has a fixed number of chromosomes. Okay, so all humans have the same number of chromosomes. If you have a number more than the fixed number, or it is known, it has been counted, the number of chromosomes of humans have been counted. So if you have the number greater than that, then it's an abnormality. So with that being said, we're first going to take a look at types of sexually reproducing cells. Then we'll come back to chromosomes to understand why we're talking about this. So there are two types of sexually reproducing cells. Sexually reproducing cells means cells that are able to give offspring, or to give birth to other cells. So the first ones are somatic cells, which are body cells. Then the second ones are called gametes, which are sex cells. So gametes in female humans are ova. Actually, in mammals are ova or ovaries. Then in male mammals, they are sperms. Those are the sex cells, the gametes. Then the other cells, like the cells that makes your hand, your fingers, your eyes, those are called somatic cells. So the number of chromosomes in each somatic cell is called the diploid number, and its symbol is 2n. So let's say a cell that makes a part of your eye. So the number of chromosomes in that cell is called the diploid number, and its symbol is 2n. The number of chromosomes in each gamete, meaning sex cells, is called the monoploid or haploid number, and its symbol is n. Okay, so if you can see, diploid is 2n, meaning that diploid is always 2 times haploid. This is simple to understand. Consider this: your body cells are not directly involved in giving in fertilization. So fertilization, where a male and female gametes meet. Okay, so your body cells are not involved. So but the gametes are involved. So for a newborn to be there, the number of chromosomes that must be contributed to whatever is going to make that newborn must come half from each of the parents. So half comes from the father, half comes from the mother. Okay, so that it has double. So in short, what I'm saying is n comes from the mother, n comes from the father. When they combine, they form 2n, and that 2n makes up now the body cells and other cells of the offspring. Hope this thinking has helped. Okay, so normal persons should have 2n in the body cells, in the somatic cells. Okay, so mother and father have to give half of their cells. So half of their cells they deliver in gametes. That's why gametes have half. So mother delivers half, father delivers half, then they combine to form 2n, which is the required number for all somatic cells. So you can think of it in that way. You will be able to remember this concept. So in conclusion, the haploid number is always half of the diploid number in a given species. So here are some species with their diploid number and haploid number. Remember, the diploid number is for somatic cells, the haploid number is for gametes or sex cells. So human beings are 46 as diploid number, and the haploid is just half of 46, which is 23. Then fruit fly, they have 8, then haploid is 4. Tomatoes have 24, and the haploid is 12. Next, look at types of chromosomes. So there are two types of chromosomes. There are sex chromosomes and non-sex chromosomes, or autosomes. So somatic cells, which are body cells, have 2 sex chromosomes. Well, gametes have 1 sex chromosome. Okay, So somatic cells, body cells, have two types, have two types of sex chromosomes, or have two sex chromosomes, while gametes have one sex chromosome. So this is the fact. So we have two types of chromosomes: sex chromosomes and autosomes. So the ones that we're interested in, that we're going to study later, are sex chromosomes. So somatic cells have two, while gametes have one.